Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about how we reignite our drive and energy after we achieve financial freedom, and how do we get the most out of our time. When we come into wealth, sooner or later, most of us arrive to two conclusions. Number one, that time is our biggest asset. Life is too short and we want to tick items off our bucket list as soon as possible. We also only want to spend our precious time on things that truly matter: health, family, meaningful relationships. The second idea is that energy in the moment is our wisest guide. Energy guides us, and if a person or activity energizes us, we lean into it. But if it drains us, we move away. We optimize for time and energy. And this feels like ultimate wisdom. This time and energy framework is dominant in the post-wealth world today. Yet here is what I found. 10, 20 years later, this kind of thinking, it doesn't lead us to the life we expect. Instead, it leads us to a life that's comfortable but flat. Low drive, low energy, low aliveness. Little pull towards anything extraordinary. I also found that true post-wealth sages, people whose lives we instinctively admire, they do things differently. They too care deeply about time and energy, but they approach this differently. And they end up with a different kind of life. They feel both content and energized, calm yet fully alive, all in whatever projects they choose without burning out. They live a life of compounding fulfillment. To be fair, it takes those sages decades of painful trial and error to master this. We, however, are going to learn the basics of that attitude today, and in our future calls, we are going to take it to more advanced levels, and we'll talk about purpose and mission. So, what actually happens to our drive and energy post-wealth? Why is it even a problem? Let's talk about what I call the post-wealth apathy. Most of us come into wealth burnt out by years of hard work. So our priority very naturally becomes to stop chasing, to learn to let go, to enjoy the moment, to finally relax. So we optimize our lives for ease, comfort, and pleasure. We delegate whatever we don't want to do. And why wouldn't we? Haven't we earned this right through years of struggle and self-sacrifice? So we build habits around ease and comfort in those first few years after we come into wealth. We surround ourselves with others living a similar lifestyle. And you know what? It's healthy. It's nourishing. It's even necessary. And it feels great. Life is finally good. But here is the problem. Soon, something starts to feel off. We don't really want anything. Not enough to actually do it. Not enough to sacrifice our peace and comfort. We are not driven and energized the way we used to be, the way we want to be. We don't feel fully alive. So we try to reignite our drive and energy. We get fit, we stay busy, we go on adventures, we spend time with family and people we care about. We are doing all the right things. Yet our drive is not coming back. Our energy is still lacking. In fact, we become increasingly reluctant to fully engage with life. And for some, the strongest desire becomes to actually have desires. We say, I want to want. This is the post-wealth apathy. And it's common. And it can last for years, even decades. Apathy is not just unpleasant, it's dangerous. Left unaddressed, it can lead to accelerated brain aging, Alzheimer's disease, and dementia. Post-wealth apathy prevents us from finding purpose and mission, leading to painful regret later in life. The post-wealth apathy can destroy our life, and it does not resolve on its own. So how do we break out? By mastering its biochemistry. Let's talk about the biochemistry of the post-wealth apathy. Apathy is not laziness or lack of character or discipline. It's a biochemical state when our brain sees no reason to engage. Our brain is wired to conserve energy, so if there is no reason, there will be no engagement. If there is no reason to engage, it will not release dopamine. And when we are low on dopamine, we are low drive, low energy, and low aliveness. When we optimize our life for ease and comfort, we actually signal to our brain not to release dopamine. And this is not the full story, because at the same time, cortisol, the molecule of stress, often stays elevated for years post-wealth. And this happens in response to very common scenarios post-wealth. When we feel fear of losing our hard-earned wealth, when we feel incompetent as investors, when we have self-doubts and imposter syndrome and lost identity. Chronic high cortisol further discourages risk and effort. Apathy is a state when we have chronic low dopamine and very often chronic high cortisol. Apathy leads to less brain stimulation, and over time the brain adapts to this low stimulation state, because that's what the human brain does. It adapts to our circumstances. So disengagement becomes the default. Effort feels heavier and initiative feels harder. We often feel tired. We get stuck in a self-reinforcing apathy loop, where low engagement leads to low dopamine, which leads to low drive and even less engagement. And apathy persists when our brain forgets that effort leads to reward. And apathy resolves when our brain relearns that effort leads to reward. But retraining our brain is hard. So when we crave feeling alive, we seek easy ways to boost dopamine. Alcohol and drugs, love affairs and porn, day trading, social networks, gambling, sugary foods. Dopamine spikes and drops. We feel energized, and then we quickly feel drained. And then we seek easy fixes again. Soon enough, we get addicted. Addiction leads to unstable dopamine. And you know what? We don't like the person we've become. Unfocused, unproductive, undriven. Nobody creates outlier success if they don't want to be a very different kind of person. So addiction leads to dissatisfaction with ourselves, which leads to high and unstable cortisol and chronic stress. Addiction means unstable dopamine and unstable high cortisol. And this is the opposite of where we want to be, in a place of healthy drive and energy. And the formula for that state is stable high dopamine and stable low cortisol. So apathy means chronic low dopamine and chronic high cortisol. Apathy and addiction mean volatile dopamine and volatile cortisol. Biochemistry teaches us that if we optimize our life for ease and comfort, we end up in low drive and energy and chronic low-grade stress. So what's the solution? The solution is to build a healthy dopamine loop. Stable high dopamine plus stable low cortisol. But this is not what most of us are doing. And that time and energy framework, the popular one, is partly to blame. So what's wrong with it? Let's look at the first idea. Time is our biggest asset. It's true. But when we optimize for time, we often do it at the expense of drive and energy. We get caught in common traps. Let's talk about two of them, and I'm going to use stories to illustrate them. So number one is novelty chasing, and number two is full-time parenting. Novelty chasing. After a big exit, Alex reads the book Die with Zero. He decides to dedicate the rest of his life to fun experiences. So he lives on constant highs, non-stop activity, adrenaline and peak experiences. His dopamine spikes with each new experience. He feels energized and alive. But soon, his brain adapts. It recalibrates what counts as exciting, what's worth a dopamine release. He now needs even more excitement for the same payoff. But the fun experiences feel increasingly meaningless. And at the same time, normal life starts to feel flat and lifeless. Alex is bored and reluctant to engage. Eventually, his apathy loop starts. Low engagement leads to low dopamine, which leads to low drive and energy, and even less engagement. Alex optimized for time. He squeezed as many adventures into his life as he could. Now he's stuck in the post-wealth apathy. Now full-time parenting. A successful real estate developer called Dan becomes a full-time parent. The choice feels right. It feels responsible, even noble. And it benefits him and his family greatly. But a few months in, he feels understimulated, lacking progress, low drive and energy. While parenting is not easy, the challenge is simply too narrow for Dan. He gets bored. His brain is not releasing much dopamine. His apathy loop starts. But Dan rationalizes his lack of drive. He says, I'll stay home till the kids go to college. But it only deepens his apathy. Now Dan optimized for time with family. And now he's stuck in post-wealth apathy. So that was the idea that time is our biggest asset. But the second part of that time and energy framework is the idea that energy in the moment is our wisest guide. And I agree, energy awareness is hugely important. Our brain may be signaling something vital, but we often misinterpret the signal, or we assume it benefits us. Because we are unaware of powerful influences like emotions and cognitive biases, our own physical state, or other people and their behavior, ideas, and desires. We only think that we follow energy, but in reality, we just follow our mood. I may feel drained by a person. I may feel energy negative towards them. But I may simply be experiencing a negative emotion, envy, or maybe social anxiety. The problem is not them. The problem may just be me. Yet I walk away from the person or label them. Or say I feel energy negative towards a demanding task. But nothing is wrong with the task. In reality, I feel incompetent or maybe potentially judged. I walk away instead of learning and growing through that opportunity. So when we follow what we call energy, we think we are trusting some higher wisdom. But it's a fantasy. In reality, we just choose the easy path and justify it with the energy label. But in the process, we give away control of our lives. We give away our hard-earned freedom. And we stay stuck in the post-wealth apathy. Time and energy framework, unfortunately, often leads to the post-wealth apathy. But there is a better approach. And it's how those post-wealth sages approach life. It breaks the apathy cycle. It reignites our drive and energy, and it puts us back in charge. And most importantly, it's grounded in science, not fantasy. I call it the Worthy Challenge Framework. Brain chemistry tells us that we feel energized when our brain chooses to engage with a task. When it chooses to engage, we get lots of dopamine and then high drive and energy. On the contrary, when our brain chooses not to engage, our dopamine stays low, and sometimes we can have high cortisol, which makes us feel drained and stressed. So how does the brain decide? Turns out it runs two questions. Is the task worth it? And can I handle it? Whether it's worth it depends on the risk versus reward analysis, which our brain runs. And the rewards include things like joy, meaning, growth, learning, progress, human connection, wealth, assets, and even curiosity satisfied. And the risks is anything that we may be losing if we engage with a task. And those include things like losing the peace of mind, or losing our comfort, status, or money, identity, belonging, respect. When our brain concludes that risks of this project exceed the potential rewards, it decides to conserve energy, not release dopamine, and it orders us to disengage. Now, the second question, can I handle it? In this case, our brain compares the demands to the resources. It wonders, are the demands manageable with the resources we have? The resources in this case include ability and skills, social support and reputation, wealth, health, emotional bandwidth. If it concludes that the demands exceed our resources, it decides that the task is too hard to engage, and it does not release dopamine. Say, I get really inspired about a moonshot project, but never take action. Why? Because my brain decided that the task is unmanageable, even though I may keep telling myself that it's not. So I'm not driven enough to act. Or I've tried to make my spouse happy for years, but I'm making no progress. My brain decided that the task is impossible. I'm no longer driven to even try. However, if the brain concludes that the demands are less than the available resources, it decides the task is perfectly manageable and it gives us lots of dopamine. We feel driven and energized by that task. So to summarize, if the rewards exceed the risks and the resources exceed the demands of the task, this is when our brain decides to engage and gives us drive and energy. If the task is both worth it and manageable, we enter the worthy challenge state. We have high dopamine, lots of drive and energy. But we only stay energized for as long as the task continues to feel both worth it and manageable. It's a state we need to manage. The worthy challenge state is the optimal biochemistry for taking action. The worthy challenge state means stable high dopamine plus stable low cortisol, exactly what we need for a healthy, sustainable drive and energy. But here is the most important part. The brain only cares about our perception, not the objective reality. So if we change the perception, we can change our drive and energy. It means we are in charge. The worthy challenge state is a skill we all can master. But how do we create the worthy challenge state? We do it in 3 steps. 1, we upgrade our attitude. 2, we adjust our perception of the challenge level. And 3, we take action. Step 1, we upgrade our attitude. The post-12 brain is biased against effort, but we can flip it. We can choose drive, energy, and self-realization over some ease and comfort. And the more we make this choice, the faster the brain relearns. Effort leads to reward. We need to stop optimizing for ease, comfort, and mood and start optimizing for the worthy challenge state. Because this is how we break the apathy cycle. This is how we reclaim control over our lives, reignite our drive and energy, and finally live our dreams. Because we are all here to feel alive and to realize our unique potential. We're here to build an extraordinary life on our own terms. This is the worthy challenge attitude. So let's summarize. The time and energy attitude leads to low drive, stress, instability, and no control. The worthy challenge attitude, however, leads to high drive, peace, stability, and control. Now, step 2 in building that healthy dopamine loop. We need to adjust the challenge level. For a task to really energize us, it needs to be neither too easy nor too hard. It must demand our best. Not less, but not more. If a task is worthy but feels too easy or too hard, we can adjust our perception of its difficulty or of our abilities and resources. So, for example, if a task feels too easy, we can do one of 2 things, or both. We increase our perception of the task's difficulty, or we reduce our perception of our own abilities and resources. So we increase the perception of the difficulty of the task by becoming more ambitious about the outcome. For example, about the scale or quality or impact of the outcome of that task. But to reduce the perception of our own ability, we may need to ask, am I being too optimistic or overconfident? A common problem among entrepreneurs. Now the easy task feels more challenging, less boring, more interesting. So we get much more dopamine from our brain. say parenting doesn't feel challenging enough, so we can make it more ambitious. We ask, how do I maximize my kids' chances for a deeply fulfilling lives? What do I need to learn and master? What do I need to model? Now, the opposite situation. A task at hand feels too hard, so we can reduce the perception of its difficulty or increase the perception of our ability and resources. We can reduce the task difficulty by learning more about it, or by breaking the task into steps. Or we can increase our perception of resources by leveraging wealth, people, and tech, or by confronting our own scarcity fears. And here is the most interesting part. We can increase the perception of our own ability. And we do it by intentionally increasing confidence in our proven capabilities. This is one skill that we work on a lot during my in-person events, because it makes all the difference whether we have a complete clarity about our own proven capabilities. And here is what I found. Post-wealth, our confidence is often weakened by self-doubts. And those self-doubts come from the fact that for years we focused on failures because we had to. We had to learn from them, we had to address them. There was urgency and pain attached to those failures. As good leaders, we also credited others or luck for all the success. As a result, we ignored personal wins. And post-wealth, we are not actually sure what those proven capabilities are, or we are not aware of many of them, and we only know a few. We can rebuild that confidence by asking, how have I consistently won in the past? And what's the proof? Because higher confidence in earned capability makes a task feel easier. I want to make something very clear. Our goal is not to choose the hardest task. It is to challenge ourselves to do our best. Because the more we act at our best, the faster we grow. The more rewarded and satisfied we feel. The faster we relearn that effort leads to reward. The more driven and energized we become. Let's look at a very common scenario. Sam, a successful exited founder, thinks, I built a great business and I would do another one, but I feel energy negative towards the idea. The personal cost was way too high and life is too short and too good to risk it. If he applies the time and energy framework, his answer is very clear, a big no to the new venture. Now let's see what happens if he applies the worthy challenge framework. Question number 1. Is that new venture worth it? And you know what? If Sam has done his work, he is very likely to say, hell yes. Because it will allow me to fully self-realize, maximize my impact, feel fulfilled, and model that attitude to my kids. Sam will then have to ask himself, do I have what it takes? And Sam may very well say yes, because this challenge is aligned with my proven, unique capabilities. So I'm not worried about competition or losing my drive. I know how to get the right people and resources, and I know how to support my health and energy levels. So yes, I can handle this. without much stress and burnout. The time and energy framework is discouraging, so it leads to apathy. The worthy challenge framework, however, is encouraging, and it leads to healthy, sustainable energy. So we've taken 2 steps to build our dopamine loop. We've upgraded our attitude, and we've managed the challenge level of a task at hand. Now, step number 3, take action. If adjusting our attitude and difficulty are not enough, we still must kickstart our drive. We act even if we don't feel like it, because the stakes are too high. The post-wealth apathy can destroy our life. So by acting, we force ourselves out of that apathy cycle and into the worthy challenge loop. Because from the brain chemistry standpoint, when we take decisive action, we get high dopamine. We are getting high drive, and that leads to more action. We start the project trusting we'll get energized by it. And you know what? We will. But to stay driven, we still need to be sure our brain sees the task as worthy and challenging enough. The worthy challenge framework is powerful. It lets us take control of our drive and energy, our health, and our freedom. We can build an extraordinary life on our own terms. Now let me quickly summarize. So the post-wealth brain is biased towards ease and comfort, leading to the post-wealth apathy, a dangerous, unhealthy, unfulfilling state. To break out, we must build a healthy dopamine loop. We do it in 3 steps. We adopt the worthy challenge attitude. We adjust our perception of the challenge level of a task at hand, and we act despite our mood. This loop leads to sustainable drive and energy, and eventually to the feeling of self-realization. It builds a life of compounding fulfillment.
All right, guys. Anyone has any questions?
I have a question, Anastasia.
Hi, Jeff. Good to see you.
Hey,
Jeff,
great to see you. Mm-hmm. Thank you for this. This is wonderful. I was wondering if you could discuss the merits of finding one big new challenge versus several small things that challenge us or we enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been thinking about it a lot, and obviously different things work differently for different people at different stages. But if we think about a stage when we have already recovered, when we don't feel burnt out again, and I think, Jeff, for you personally, that probably applies by now, I am a huge believer in choosing one thing over many things. And I will do another call on how to find a mission, and we'll talk about how different people choose a mission in a way that really energizes them and creates a lot of drive. And basically, what I found is that when we have one mission, we can channel all of that energy, and we really feel pulled, and we create much bigger impact. And when we create much bigger impact, and it also, the activity itself feels deeply rewarding, like we spend a lot of time in the flow state, which is a deeply rewarding state. What happens is that our brain starts to connect that activity regularly with reward, making it easier and easier. Because if you look at some of these people who are doing incredibly hard things, but they're not burnt out, this is exactly the secret. Over time, they train their reward system to energize them and make it feel easier and easier. And also, obviously, competence grows. If we focus on one thing, we become more and more competent. Competence means not only ease, but it also means confidence. Confidence means we take on even more interesting, even more complex challenges. And finally, when we choose one thing over many, we also create a competitive edge, and that's very important. Because if we become so competent over time in this particular thing, we have less stress about competition. And if we have less stress, once again, our life is easier and the whole activity is much more rewarding. Because what we don't want another startup that burns us out, right? We want to really intelligently and wisely set ourselves up for a mission which doesn't burn us out, but feels rewarding every single day. There will still be problems, but they will seem smaller and smaller in comparison to the reward we're getting from our work.
Hi, Anastasia. How are you? You're looking well in my
Hi. Good to see you. Good to see you,
Yeah.
Sumit.
I had a question. I am on a board of advisors to a family who is managing their wealth, and they don't pay. I'm supposed to take a nominal salary. I don't even take that, but I get a lot of joy and satisfaction out of helping them run their money. However, when we've tried to add people to the board who are like at our stage, who've had an exit and who are managing their money, many people say, there's no reward, no monetary reward in this. So quite a lot of people in our pool of people, they have immense amount of talent, immense amount of knowledge. And I've always felt that as long as you're ready to share your knowledge for free, there will always be takers. But a lot of us refuse to share that knowledge for free, or for a reward that's not big enough. How do you change that attitude? Because you don't need the money, but still you don't want to share. So I sometimes don't get it.
Are you talking about changing attitude of other people or ourselves?
Yeah, sometimes change. I want to. I think I've changed my attitude. So how we change our attitude is easier to change. But once it's only if we successfully change ours can we hope to convince someone to change theirs.
Of course. I think that people need to experience this. Even if they don't want to, it's this step 3 we talked about. Sometimes we need to do something anyway because we feel maybe there is a chance that it will make us feel energized, and then it does. And then we start building this reward system, this loop that it feels energized. So, Sumit, if you want to, for these people to feel the way you feel, maybe you can find a way to encourage them to try teaching and see how they feel about it.
Yeah, maybe just invite them for one session. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Anastasia, I also have a question. In one of your earlier podcasts, you actually talked about the founders starting their second or third business quickly after the exit event, and that was not the right idea. Yeah. I know that you drew some distinction by saying that they should maybe take a year or two to think first, but is that generally a good idea? Has your perception of that type of activity as the next challenge shifted, or is there some nuance to it?
All right. So first of all, I found that there is a small category of people for whom never taking a break between businesses is a good idea. And these are very young founders without families. Like if you sold a business at 27 and you're single and you are ready to go for the next one, there is literally no reason not to do it. And because you're still learning and you're probably not ready for the kind of deep analysis that some people need to do later in life before they are ready for the next business. And also maybe you're not burnt out enough. But except for that, so far what I've seen is that everyone else really benefits from a break. But what's important is that it's a break and not retirement. Because if we're talking about retirement, then suddenly we are exactly in this apathy situation. So if you look at the statistics of how many people actually start new businesses after they sell or when they start new businesses, it looks quite shocking. Because for the first 2 years after we have a successful exit, the likelihood, the probability of a person starting a new business stays very stable. After 2 years, it starts going down, and after 3, the probability basically collapses. And I think the reason for that is we adapt to that comfort. And it becomes so hard for us to break out. And for me, more often than not, I now come across people who are in that situation rather than in the situation when they rushed to create a new business too early. But to answer your question, yes, I still think taking a break is extremely important, especially if you know what you're doing, because you can come to this state of contentment and peace and nourished body and soul, and then you're just naturally ready to do something else that's amazing and your own.
Thank you.
Anastasia, what's the biggest mistake that you see most of us make? The number one that we're going to stumble over? And don't be shy or nice. Drill into us.
Well, I think it depends on the stage. As I just mentioned, the number one mistake at first can be not taking care of ourselves and actually letting other people influence us too much into doing something that's not really healing for us or not what we need at the moment. So this initial state of recovering is extremely important. When people skip it, they pay a high price later on, because if you're not in a good, nourished state, you're much likely to make a bad decision. But if we are talking 3 years on, the biggest mistake is avoiding effort and avoiding challenge and choosing comfort. It's very hard to get out of it. But I would also say that a huge mistake is choosing wrong people to surround ourselves with, because all of us underestimate just how extremely important it is to have the right people around us. This is how humans naturally learn. This is how we make our decisions. And this is hugely important. So I would say resting and being extremely discerning and strategic about whom we spend time with are the ways to avoid those most common mistakes.
If I may go one more,
Absolutely,
Anastasia.
Jeff.
Yeah, for those you've seen who have exited this apathy state, would you say it's more common for those people to find it bit by bit, trial and error, start and stop, or more of a all at once, and you realize that this is the thing, and you go all in?
You know, it's a fantastic question, because I've seen both. I've seen people just quietly, step by step, climbing out of this state. But I also saw people who just realize that it's too miserable to not be fully engaged. And then they take a big step and they start something that's really challenging. For this second group of people, they usually do go through a bit of stressful period before they get out. But once we understand much better how to avoid burnout, it's still not nearly as bad as the first time around. I think if we move to another business or whatever big challenge later on, but we have a much better understanding of what exactly actually caused the burnout, what exactly created this state when we are so discouraged to do anything else. Once we really learn it, then it's much easier to avoid it in the future. But also, I mentioned about the idea that our proven capabilities are so important for us to understand, because second time around, we actually have the luxury of knowing those capabilities and choosing a business or activity around those. And once we do that, things are less stressful and much easier. Because most of us first time around had no choice. We were just learning. We were just experimenting, building those capabilities. It's much, much harder. A mistake I see is that sometimes people get bored and they say, oh, second time around, they're going to do something completely different, something out of character. They justify it with stories like, I actually want to get out of the comfort zone. I want to do something different. But then it's just much harder. And with wealth, what happens is a year or two in, when things get very difficult, it's so easy to decide why bother.
I have another question, Anastasia. We have been talking about starting another challenge, equating it with another business. You started something maybe more impactful to people's lives, and that's what I did as well in a different area. Have you actually been able to collect any statistics or information as to whether people generally find that type of approach more purposeful, or starting another company works just as well?
Oля, what I definitely have found is that if we're talking about exited founders, if they choose to do something other than a business later on, oftentimes they start doing it or treating it or seeing it as a business. Like, for example, venture philanthropy or any sort of philanthropic activities, even if exited founders don't plan to do it this way, they often start running them as businesses, which is great because they realize that this is where their unique capability is. But I don't think that one is better or worse than the other. If we feel we're ready for impact and we feel that the best way we can do it in a way that will continuously drive us and maximize our positive impact in the world, is a business, great. If it's something else, perfect. If it's writing a book, excellent. I think it's more about whether we'll be interested in it for long enough to make a difference.
Thank you.
And even though I mentioned full-time parenting, some people are meant to do exactly that. And if that's your thing and you can realize yourself through parenting, that's also great. Just for most people, it's not.
Yeah, well, I'm actually a full-time parent, Anastasia.
Excellent.
Yeah, and it's actually funny. In my own way, I could certainly identify with kind of part of what you're saying. And then I think thankfully, I see where the guy says, "I'm going to do it until they go to college." Like, I don't think that's a long time for me. I'm still got babies at home, so and they go to school full time, so I've got plenty of time to figure out what I can also focus on as well. So. I guess in the breadth of things that you've seen folks focus on, some maybe a brand new startup, it could be joining a board. Someone has mentioned a new commitment like that. Could you just share maybe some non-conventional other paths just to give people an idea? Maybe like for me, I'm enjoying this stage, but it won't be quite so crazy for a long time. And you've got my brain thinking in a different way already, which is terrific. But I'm curious, maybe some other types of things that you've seen beyond simply like starting a business, or just, it looks like you work with a lot of folks. So I didn't know maybe some non-traditional things you've seen people dive into that have made a big difference in their lives.
So Matt, to me, it depends on what you find really challenging. That's the key. So for example, a very intentional parenting can be as challenging as running a business. But parenting where we just decide, okay, I will align my time with my family because this is the right thing to do, and then we just sit on the couch playing on social networks, is not challenging. So we have no juice to keep it going, and we end up in this apathy state. But whatever other adventure, also, by the way, I talked about adventures, but there are people who are very good at having adventures that are challenging. And a challenging, meaningful adventure is very different from just going somewhere, sitting in a 5-star hotel and thinking they're having adventures, right? So there are lots of shades of gray in all of these things. And as long as we find it challenging, it's good enough. I mean, there are people who go into politics, for example. I see more and more of that, and they find their mission and purpose in that place. And it's not a business. It's not anything else. It's their desire to be useful for their country or the world. Again, people write books, people create all sorts of ways to express themselves. Especially these days with AI, we suddenly have, sky's the limit what we can do to make our mark, as long as it's challenging and we'll want to keep doing it.
So I'd really
like this, like brain hacking change perception approach, right? I think my question goes down to when reviewing a challenge, I think I come to start to distrust my judgment. When would I know if it's really a low energy situation where I work on changing the perception versus really not a good fit and not a good idea? And I think I would worry about which one it is at the time. Do you have any pointers on like how to look at that?
Well, that's why I tried to create this framework and reverse engineer the stories where things work really well. So the first question is always, is it worth it? Right. So this is a very interesting question we need to spend some time on it. Like, is it something that will lead you to the life you want to have, to the impact you want to have, to who you want to be? So this is by far the most important question, because once you've figured that out, you can actually change your perception of whether you can do it or not. So people who take on those impossible tasks and actually see them through constantly work. This is what I found. They constantly work on making sure they believe they're capable of doing it. Or they bring amazing people around. But the thinking, the reasons for these decisions always come from the fact, how can I make sure my brain believes that I can do it? Not just kind of positive thinking when we sit and imagine things, but oftentimes by having actual proof that it may work.
So yes, thanks for that. It's amazing. So I think, a lot of us are asking ourselves, okay, we understand logically the dopamine part and the chemical part of it, but you said something that I noticed here, like post-wealth stages. Can you give us, what that means to you and some names that comes to mind so I can visualize and help us see this becoming to that part of the equation?
Yeah. So for me, it's less interesting what people do. For me, it's less interesting to see what people do immediately after they get financial freedom, because everyone can experiments and looks for their own way. I like to look at a decade post-wealth. And if we look at a decade post-wealth, the stages look much like this. The first half of the decade is when we tend to prioritize either getting rest and finding contentment and enoughness in life, or we keep going and we're very, very active. Whichever path we take, it's interesting that 5 is usually when this is when we look back and we think, not that much actually happened in my life. Either I was too busy on things that are not meaningful, or I kind of rested and haven't made much progress. So what I see is that 5 is a big realization. People change course, adjust course, or start taking this much more seriously and think and plan their lives much better. However, I also think that if people understand the whole pattern of the first decade, there is no need to spend much time searching. We should absolutely, as I keep saying, address our needs first and have that state of satisfaction, nourishment, and contentment. But once we are there, and that can be done if we know what we're doing in a year or two, once we're there, it's very important to keep and all sorts of challenges.
Cool. Yeah. So, Anastasia, really appreciate what you shared. It definitely resonates with me. I think I've been waiting like 4 years to hear someone share all that. So thank you for putting that together. I think what I'm curious about, I know you said you're going to have a separate call on kind of purpose and mission, but was wondering if you could maybe share a few best practices you've seen. And to be specific, if you've seen someone kind of come to a decision point between an easier and a harder mission. I love what you said about the brain's ability to shift perception. And it seems like you can shift perception in either direction, right? You can make something that's the easier path seem harder, and you can make something that's the harder path seem easier. I'm wondering if you've seen one of those lead to more fulfillment. And just to be specific, I'm now going on year 3+ of sabbatical, so I'm in that danger zone. And I've kind of have this path where I could go back to the industry I was in and create another company, but I kind of feel a bit bored and like, it's not really what I want to do, versus a much more audacious, bigger vision in a totally different industry that's more disruptive, but also seems at times impossible. So I kind of personally loop between those and don't really do anything. But just curious if you've kind of seen any best practices for thinking through that.
To basically choose between relying on what you already know, but you're bored with, versus an audacious mission that is more exciting. So Ben, I would this is what this framework really is for, to make decisions like this, because you probably want to run both scenarios and compare them, but compare them from the standpoint of, because you mentioned fulfillment, of where actually you can create the most impact. Because what happens is that we were talking about stages post-wealth, that post-wealth, for most of us who actually continue to engage in life meaningfully, we start caring more and more about what it is we are actually creating for the world. So if you're thinking long-term, you want to be sure that you will be giving your very best in one of these missions. And for that, we need to understand what your true calling is. Actually, we can figure that out. And you need to understand what it is that you are really, really uniquely capable of doing. So it's very hard to choose either of these unless you have one kind of formula. And for me, the formula is exactly that. What is it you're uniquely capable of doing? And then once you've identified that and you're willing to accept the responsibility for that particular task, then you build that loop around it. Because we have so much power over how we think of difficult or hard. I don't think we need to maximize difficulty, not at all. Not the opposite, but I think the secret is to find a way to create maximum impact without burnout. This is the secret. Without killing ourselves, without making it so hard that we'll give up. Because we just have to be realistic. When we have money, giving up is very easy.
Got it. So you're saying like what you found leads to best kind of mission or purpose is that which maximizes impact plus maximizes someone's like essence or unique genius. That's like the best.
Yeah, because if we understand what it is we are uniquely capable of doing, not theoretically, but really based on the proof we have. Like we have confidence. This is my thing. This is what I'm actually excellent at. Then we can build around that. Because one of the common mistakes is just getting excited about an idea and running with it without understanding that it may not be for us. And we don't have enough time to actually talk about the whole logic and framework for that, but that's the basic idea, that it needs to be really, truly ours, not because we feel like it, but because we actually know what we're capable of, and we know what we naturally lean towards in terms of our interest. And this is the most important exercise, I think, for us to do when we have the luxury of time after financial freedom. So in your particular case, between these two things, I immediately am concerned that the novelty of the new idea may be energizing you, because novelty does that to us. And we may not necessarily want to just make our decisions based on that. That's why just feeling energy without understanding and interpreting energy is so difficult, because novelty will always win against something that's familiar.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Anastasia. This has been incredibly insightful. I maybe even building on Benjamin's last question or comment, and then maybe common themes throughout your presentation around making impact, but maybe that hesitation for burnout, but at the same time, right? And the value of time. It's not that the value of time goes away, I'm curious from your experiences of speaking to many people in situations like ours where, we've had successful exits and so forth. This kind of question of, do I go back and build a venture-backed business? And maybe this is very tactical or tangible, but do I go back and go venture raise and set myself up for a $1 billion business? Or do I build something that's more self-funded? I don't want to use the word lifestyle because I think it comes around the wrong way, but something that you're able to build with your intentionality and within your own time frame and with your own thoughtfulness versus being on someone else's time frame, if you want to call it that. And there's always a trade-off of, I guess, maybe potential impact that you think about in that scenario. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts or experiences around that.
So the concern is that you may be on someone else's time frame because you will not be making decisions in one of these paths. Somebody else will be making decisions.
Right. You might be working at a speed or in a time frame that is necessarily not one that is conducive to still the value of time that we do all have.
Yeah.
Right. And our energy and these other values that we want to put time and energy into.
Yeah.
Versus being able to build something maybe on your own terms, but obviously, but still make impact. Right.
Well, I'm always a fan of freedom and choosing where we can actually make all the choices. I would be quite concerned if someone else is dictating their time schedule on what I want to do. Again, especially when we have financial freedom, because there will be constant temptation to walk away from any situations where somebody else is threatening our autonomy or agency. So, Tim, the biggest problem really in building anything, a business or philanthropy or whatever, with wealth is that we will give up. So making sure that we have sustainable motivation before we start is the most important thing. So whenever you are considering choosing between two different things, the real question is where I'm more likely to have sustainable drive. And if you're concerned that you're giving away your agency and your autonomy to someone else, this is a big red flag, because you may not have a sustainable drive if you don't have full control of your life and your timing.
Great, thank you.
All right, guys. Anybody has any other questions? Otherwise, we are almost done. We have 5 minutes left.
Anastasia, I just have a quick comment. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of what you're talking about is kind of an intersection between Ikigai and Jim Collins' Good to Great. If you kind of look at Ikigai, it is kind of, for a post-exit founder, Ikigai seems alone, it seems a little soft, right? You can go into coaching or writing, and Good to Great seems a little too cold, meaning you have to fully optimize, you have to make a ton of money. And as a post-exited founder, I tend to kind of look at the overlap between the two, and it really helps kind of figure out what your personal strategy is, and where your relevance is, so you can still do good, be a positive impact. But again, talking about what you said, figure out what it is that you are the best at in the world at doing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that makes a ton of money, but going back to Jim Collins, it should make some money. And I was just, it was a kind of a revelation or epiphany when I saw that Good to Great and Ikigai have such a common denominator. So maybe that's something that we can look further into.
Yeah, I think it's very important for us to be doing something where we have a chance to get feedback from the world that it's helping. Money is just the most common currency for that kind of feedback, but it doesn't have to be. But it's common. But if we don't get any feedback from the world that what we are doing is useful, then A, maybe it's not useful, and B, maybe we need to correct the course so it actually becomes useful. Because we don't want to look at the outcome as the reward. We want to
to make sure the activity itself is really rewarding. But the activity itself gets much more rewarding if we feel we're getting better and better at serving others, at serving the world. So any kind of currency that comes back, any kind of feedback that comes back, it feeds into this dopamine loop, which basically trains us to associate our work, our effort, with a reward. And if we're at the stage when we care about impact more than money, for example, then we need to make sure that it comes back in that form. But some people are still driven by the desire to get more wealth, and that's also fine, and I respect it a lot. Sometimes we actually need more financial security, and otherwise we may want to do it because we plan to use that money for leverage for something that's very important. We see it a lot when people work really, really hard to earn money, and then they go and they do something else separately where they cannot possibly earn money, but they use money as leverage. So I think that this relationship between impact, fulfillment, and wealth is more complex than Ikigai suggests, for example.
I'm curious what you really think about Ikigai.
All right. It may take more than the remaining 3 minutes, but I'll talk only about one angle because you're provoking me because I'm not a big fan of the framework. But the reason I'm not a big fan is because I see so many people post-exit taking it too literally, and they think they need to fill each of the boxes. And we're talking about the Ikigai diagram, not about the Japanese word Ikigai, which means something else entirely. But they think that they need to to tick every box in the Ikigai diagram to have purpose or to have fulfillment. But what happens is that if you do that, you only optimize really for a chance of maybe enjoying what you're doing, if you're lucky, right? And maybe earning money for it. But it actually is not enough, especially post-wealth, for us to drive us fully. And also, if somebody's trying to make a decision, shall I do another business or not, and they use Ikigai, the answer will be yes, do another business. But it may not be right in this particular moment in time, because the Ikigai diagram does not take into account that it's a process, right? That we may not necessarily want to jump back into business early on. But most importantly, I just don't think it's the formula for fulfillment. Because there is no mention of our intent. And I think fulfillment is tied very closely to why we're doing things. I see someone with a raised hand.
It's me, Anastasia.
Oh,
it's Daryl.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Mm-hmm. Hi, Daryl. Yeah.
Good. I'm just trying to summarize in my head so I can have like a to-do list moving forward. That's just how my brain works. So like, am I getting it right? Like really think about what got you here, what you're capable, like what are you really good at? And that's going to help guide you toward the next, toward round two. Is that, am I summarizing it okay in my head?
So what I found is that if we really know, and we know because it has been proven again and again and again, that we tend to choose a certain activity and we over time build unique capability around that activity, then two things happen. First of all, it's precious. This is our personal edge. This is how we win in life. It has to be fully recognized, appreciated, and grown. And the second thing, that if we ignore it, then we will be feeling like we are not growing in some area where we have already grown a lot. And actually what happens is that once we've grown in some area, that growth will demand growth. We'll feel uncomfortable that we are not making progress somewhere where we already have become very good. And if we ignore it long enough, that atrophies, of course,
but we need to be very conscious about that risk. Is this a capability we actually are going to lose to atrophy? Is it what we want? Or do we want to keep supporting it? So this understanding, like when we are at this stage, when we have already achieved a lot and the world has given us confirmation that we are very valuable and that we create a disproportionate impact, when we are at this stage, the biggest personal edge we have in the world is actually going back and seeing in reality what that proven capability is, number one. And the second one is, what do we naturally choose to do when we have a choice? Because this is our calling, right? This is what we were sent to this planet to do. So if we can choose an activity going forward at the intersection of that unique capability and that calling that we have, then drive will come. And if we have the drive, the calling, and that personal edge that just makes us so good, that combination, that formula together increases the probability of the next thing or the success of the next thing tremendously. And when I say success, I'm not just talking about the financial success, but the success of it as the source of our fulfillment, as the kind of activity which will give us meaning, fulfillment, and purpose in life. And
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, going back to Ole's comment about whether we should take a break between businesses or not, if we can actually think through this, if we can have clarity on what we are meant to do, what we are uniquely great at, what we can master even better, this is how we position ourselves for that amazing mission without the burnout. The real luxury of experience.
Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much. I apologize again for the technical difficulties. And I will let you know when the recording is ready, especially for those who only could join later.
And Anastasia,
yeah,
people want to know, when is the next one?
Pablo, thank you for pushing me. I am thinking maybe next week we should talk about purpose, because people seem to be really interested in that topic. I really wanted to talk about this post-wealth apathy first, because this is how we get stuck and we don't go anywhere. But once we get unstuck, then the next question, of course, is like, okay, I know how to get unstuck, but where do I channel all that drive and energy? What do I actually choose to do that will give me the sense of purpose in life? So that's next week.